Welcome to Turbo News Breaking News Show. Listen to this article you can also read on turbonews.com.
Aloha and good afternoon. My name is Jürgen Steinmetz, joining you from the Breaking News Show in Honolulu. This morning with me is Paul Hudson. He is a frequent guest on our show, and he's, I believe, in Washington, D.C. with Flyers Rights. And Flyers Rights, of course, is an organization you really need when you travel and you have issues and problems. And he's the expert in problems. And he just told me we're going to have a really good Thanksgiving travel season. So tell us more about it. Welcome, Paul.
Sure. Well, as the saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if you're going to be traveling by air, and domestically, we're looking at maybe 30 million people doing that in the next week. Internationally, I don't know what the number is, but it's certainly in the tens of millions. First, you can go to our website, flyersrights.org. There's a section called Know Your Rights that will give a lot more detail than what I'm able to cover in this brief interview. But if we can start with how you avoid the number one problem of air travel, which is delays. It's been that case for a long time. We have like 3 tips I would offer to people. First is, if you can, have direct early morning flights, because if your flight is canceled or excessively delayed, you have time in the day to make other arrangements. Later in the day or in the evening, you could be well stranded overnight. That could even last a couple of days or more. Second thing is, if you really have to be somewhere, it's hard to put off Thanksgiving and Christmas and things like that, birthdays, others, is you can have a backup cancelable reservation on another airline. You can't use the same airline because their software will screen you out. But you can, for perhaps 20% more, have a feature in another reservation as a backup that if you don't need it, you can cancel it and get a full refund. And if you do need it, it's there for you. A third tip is to build in an extra day. About a third of flights now are delayed, and many over an hour or more. And if you're making a connection, that can be a real problem. And between 1% and 5% flights are canceled. And that can really mean your delay will be hours to even days. Because the planes are full now, everyone in a canceled flight is not going to be able to get on the next flight. You might have to wait several flights. You might have to buy a ticket at another airline. So building an extra day in is another thing you can do. But let's suppose you are delayed. What are your rights? What is delay compensation available to you? Well, in the EU, that is for flights within the EU or to and from the EU, they have a program for 3 hours or more. You can get up to $700 in delay compensation. There is also something called the Montreal Convention, which applies to international flights. That can go up to $7,600. However, you have to make an application, and they make it very tough. Essentially, that will provide you for compensation for the things that you would otherwise be out of pocket for. Next thing is, what happens if your baggage is delayed or even lost? Well, you are entitled to get necessary expenses, things like toiletry and so forth. And the airline, in most cases, bags are not lost. They're normally just delayed. They have an obligation to deliver that bag to you. You shouldn't have to go back to the airport for it. There's a liability limit on baggage if they do seriously damage or lose your bag. Domestically, it's about $3,800 now. Internationally, it's about half that, about $1,700. And that's per person. That's not per bed. Then let's say the worst case happens and you are stranded in an intermediate place. There is something called the 3-hour rule. If you're on a plane on the tarmac, the airline has to let you out of the plane domestically after 3 hours. So you can make other arrangements, or you can still stick with the same airline. But previous to this rule, they would keep people on the planes for as long as 12 hours or more. Now, for international flights, it's a 4-hour number. And after 2 hours, you're supposed to get hydration. You're supposed to get snacks, food. The bathrooms have to work, things of that nature. But there's no actual compensation of that. If they violate the 3-hour rule, the airlines can be fined. And occasionally, some of the fine goes to the passenger, but you cannot count on it. There's also a matter of avoiding trouble with your baggage, especially, and with TSA. It used to be that almost all airlines had a 50-pound limit, but some have now reduced that to 40 pounds. You need to be aware of restrictions and extra rules that many airlines are now imposing, not just for the cost of the baggage check, but sometimes when you do the baggage check. There's one airline, Spirit, which actually has 70 different, what they call optional fees. And it's like a minefield to avoid these fees. The fees can easily add up to more than the ticket. Finally, for long-haul flights, there is a problem with DVT, or deep vein thrombosis. If you're sitting immobile in a seat for more than an hour or so, what happens is blood clots build up in your legs. Now, normally these things go away, but in some cases, they go to your lungs, and people have serious medical problems, and some people even die. So the answer to that is you don't want to sit in a flight for more than an hour or two without getting up and without stretching your legs, especially. There's also something you can take, which I use quite regularly, called Pignogenol, which is actually it's a generic over-the-counter. Of course, check with your doctor, but that will give you, it's like a blood thinner, but it's a natural pine bark, actually. And that's been recommended by a lot of physicians. Finally, when you go through TSA, what I do is I wear one of these vests, and I put everything that I want that would normally be in my pockets, I put it in the vest. So I simply take this off and put it in the receptacle for TSA, and everything goes through in one place. So you're not, being hassled by having to pull things out of your pockets and so forth. So those are some tips that we recommend. And finally, we have 2 resources. One is a hotline called, the number is, domestically is 800 FLYERS, FLYERS 6. You can also email us at hotline@flyersrights.org. And we have a staff that will provide you with free advice when you have an air travel problem, particularly with an airline.
Well, that's a lot of information, and it's very useful information. Maybe since we're talking about it, we can get a little bit more into the upcoming Thanksgiving weekend. But also from my end, I'm also a very frequent traveler, and I have 2 things I think they're very important. There should be added to it. Don't put medication in your checked baggage. Keep your medication on you, because you never know. Always consider, if you check a bag, it may get lost. But if it's valuable, you don't want to put cash or any of these items in there, a lot of all your credit cards. You want to keep it on you, what is very important. The other thing I noticed on my own flights recently, and I had to pay for not thinking about it quite a bit. I was sick for almost 2 weeks after I got back on a United flight from Washington to Las Vegas, where I was going actually what they call Polaris class. And I came from Europe, and it was wonderful. You had a nice bed, you can sleep, you keep warm, you have Fifth Avenue blankets, and the whole spiel. But on the same plane, and I know I was flying the same plane, and that's why I choose that flight with a Polaris class from Washington to Las Vegas. Yes, you get the nice seat, but you don't get a blanket and you don't get a pillow. And it was freezing cold. Thinking you had this blanket, I left my own blanket. I usually keep for economy flights. I put it in the suitcase at customs. I put my little pillow I have in the suitcase at customs, and there you are for 4 hours. And literally, it was like you're like in the northern part of Alaska, and there was no escape. They didn't have any blankets, and their reasoning for this was it's a domestic flight. So does it mean when you go on a domestic flight you have lousy service, especially if you pay for Polaris, what is not any cheaper on the through ticket? I'm wondering, but this is definitely a tip from my end. Make sure you always plan for the worst. You never assume anything with airlines these days.
So blankets and pillows used to be standard on airlines, domestic as well as international, but not anymore. And in general, especially in the U.S., airlines do not compete on service. They compete on price, and they maybe compete a little bit on features. But good service costs money. Bad service, in general, saves the airline money. So, and with the lack of competition right now, and lack of any rules that prevents degradation of service, you have many problems. The computer systems break down with some regularity. Often planes are not available. Pilots are not available. There's no backups for equipment or personnel. And there are no regulations since deregulation in the US to prevent any of that. In fact, some airlines are now discontinuing any phone service. You will not be able to call them. They have unlisted phone numbers.
Well, that sounds like the normal thing these days, no matter if it's airline or no airlines. Getting people on the phone is a real challenge. And if you do get someone on the phone, you're connected to agents that have absolutely no authority to change anything in another country, in a huge call center, and may have never traveled on an airline before. So I think this is a normal undertaking. But if you look really at our overseas competition, things are going the other way. I recently traveled a lot on Qatar Airways, on Turkish Airlines, and some of these other airlines. And I have to say, anything from the call center to service is absolutely fantastic. But then you go to Lufthansa and forget customer service and forget call centers. You don't want to talk to them because they're so rude that half of the time they hang up on you. So it really depends on the airline, and I think where the airlines are located.
Yes, and some of these airlines that are providing good service, they are getting subsidies from their governments. In general, that's not the case in Europe or the United States, at least not normally. So that's another problem. But it's been our position, Flyers Rights, that we need to have much more robust rules to prevent airlines from just degrading service to literally the rock bottom. And that includes, squeezing people in seats. It includes all kinds of gotcha fees and a whole range of other things. But without delay compensation, they have in Europe, they have it internationally, there's no delay compensation in the United States. There's really no financial incentive for airlines to improve or even maintain service. We're seeing that more and more.
Yeah, now we're going into the Thanksgiving season, and we did an article just a couple of days ago. It expected to be the busiest Thanksgiving season ever when it comes to air travel. So we're going to expect a lot of people on airplanes. And you said there is a shortage of pilots, of staff. People can get sick. Computers they collapse easily. Look at what happened to Southwest Airlines. How is the industry, you think, prepared to deal with any surprises over the Thanksgiving weekend?
Well, it's unclear. I mean, if you asked Southwest in the beginning of December of last year whether they're going to have problems, they would have said, oh, no. But in fact, they canceled, Joe, over the Christmas season, over 10,000 flights. And they stranded between 5 and 10 million people. So they missed their holidays completely. So we really don't know. I think the situation is probably going to be better than it was last year. There may be a little bit fewer people because there's less pent-up demand, but we'll have to see. Right now, they have no regulations on their computer systems. They have no regulations that requires them to have a reserve capacity. In fact, some airlines operate with negative reserves, which means that on a perfect day, they're going to cancel a certain percentage of their flights.
So you're really in uncertain territory these days when it comes to specifically domestic air travel. And domestic travel is, from what I understand, becoming more and more important compared to international travel because of geopolitical difficulties in various parts of the world. Many people are hesitating to get on an international flight, or is this not the case?
Well, there has been a big increase. I think it's pent-up demand in flights from the U.S. to Europe and vice versa. But we'll have to see. The airlines had projected that they would keep increasing the demand. But since the summer, there's been a significant drop-off. Some people speculate we may be getting into a recession, and we may have a situation where people have spent their money to make up for the COVID years, and now they're having to do other things with the limited money they have.
And also the way people fly, probably even more on an international level, when it comes to airplane sizes like the Airbus 380 or the Boeing 747 wide-body planes that can sometimes hold up to 600 or more people. They're kind of history these days, right? We did a story on Emirates. They just welcomed their 125th Airbus 380, and this was the very last Airbus 380 manufactured by Airbus. There are not going to be no more. So airlines are going into smaller planes, so they don't have to follow the hub system. So right now, when you fly from A to B, many times you go from A to C before you get to B, and you can use larger aircraft. Is this going to be a trend in the United States as well? Because many airlines still have the hub system. I mean, you have American Airlines in Dallas, you have United Airlines in Houston or Chicago or San Francisco. It looks like we're not really following the same trend as some of our international airline friends are doing.
Well, there's a number of moving parts, but the smaller planes, for instance, the 747, Boeing 737 rather, that plane was designed for short and medium haul flights, but they have stretched it. They have increased the size of the engines, and they have made it essentially a long haul plane. They have done that. Airbus has done that with their Neo plane, and so now planes that were never meant to be flying over oceans, they're now flying over oceans. So the MAX, which had, of course, these horrible crashes, it's has more fuel efficiency, and the airlines are ordering them like crazy. And they're flying them across the North Atlantic. They're flying them from the West Coast to Hawaii, and they're flying them to South America with maybe one stop or something. And our concern is that on these planes, besides the issue of being cramped seating because they were never set up for the long distance flights, they also there is a danger when you have only two engines. What happens if one engine goes out? Well, the plane can still fly, but it can't necessarily fly for 3 or 4 hours over oceans. It has to fly at a lower altitude, and there are many other complicating factors. So we'll have to see how this works out. But the airline industry generally is going to what I would call medium-sized planes that will hold 200, 250. The other problem with that trend, though, is it stresses airports. And in the United States, we have airports that are over capacity, especially in places like New York City and Chicago. And there's no way that they're going to be able to keep up with the capacity unless they use larger airplanes or they build more airports. The United States is the only major country has not built any new airports for over 30 or 40 years. And one of the main strategies for making use of the airports we have with their runway capacity is to use larger planes. Because if your plane takes 500 people instead of 200 people, you have, of course, less takeoffs and landings. And we think there needs to be some look at, for continental flights, to either mandate or to at least encourage airlines to use larger planes. There's lots of flights between New York and LA every day, and they don't have to all be smaller engine planes.
No, I completely agree, especially living in Hawaii here for the last 35 years. I've seen it over the years from nice, starting with Pan American, going on 747. They were wonderful, very comfortable in all classes to go. And today, what you mentioned, the Neon or any of the 737, it's just a disgrace. You don't feel safe. You feel completely cramped. And even when you go to the toilet, there's hardly any room to turn around. And it is not very comfortable. I kind of feel like you better close your eyes and don't even look. And yes, I completely agree with you. It should not always be what this plane maybe can do from the engine. We always have to have a special and an additional layer of safety. And I agree with you. I'm very concerned with overwater flights over long stretches of waters, like between the West Coast and Hawaii, for example, to be on a 737. And I go out of my way not to book American Airlines, to look for the United Airlines 777 or for Hawaiian Airlines, where I know I have wide-body planes. I even pay a little bit more money. It's not all about saving $10 here or $10 there. Your safety and convenience also, I think, has a role for many passengers to choose what airline they book and what plane they book and what flight they book.
Right. Well, Flyers Rights, besides providing service to passengers, we're also the only organization that is totally focused on advocacy. We're the only organization that goes into court to enforce rights. We're the organization that represents airline passengers before the FAA on safety issues. And we, of course, are very active in the rulemaking process with DOT and TSA and others. And for that, we need donations. And as we come to Thanksgiving, we hope that people remember that Flyers Rights exists, and that we will continue to exist only if we receive support from the traveling public. And so, again, if you go on our website, you can see what we do, and you can also help us out, which is absolutely necessary. We receive no money from the industry. We receive no money from the government. It all comes from you, the flyer.
Now, your organization, and for the flyer, it's definitely something to invest in because it's going to pay back 1,000 times when you're able to actually win a court case and make things better for every one of us to fly. Are your members strictly consumers, or they're also trades?
We get some money from organizations that are safety oriented. We've gotten support from the Flight Attendants Union on occasion. We don't really receive any support, though, from any other trade or other organization. The pilots, believe it or not, although they say they're always for safety, which they are, of course, but they have never contributed to flyers' rights or to any safety organizations that I'm aware of.
I mean, if I was a travel agency or a tour operator, you want your passengers to fly comfortable and safe. And part of the corporate responsibility should be to support guys like you. Don't you think so?
I think so. And, you know, it used to be in the old days that 70, 80% of the tickets were booked through travel agencies. And when something went wrong, they could act as an advocate to help you out. But that's those numbers are reversed now. And, you know, 80% or more of travel is booked through websites where if something goes wrong, there's no one there to take responsibility. And that's why it's so important that flyers' rights exist, because if we didn't, things would be a lot worse. For example, you mentioned that when you call on the phone, it's hard to get someone. And when you do get someone, they don't usually want to help you, or they don't have the authority to help you. Well, one of the things that we do is we reach above those people at the call centers into middle management. And we have, we're on Twitter, X now, and we have some clout, if you will, to help get the exceptions made when it's necessary.
And yeah, no, absolutely. You have to go, and there are different levels. I mean, I shouldn't say, because I criticized here, the airline I fly the most is United Airlines, and I have to say for United Airlines that with my status I have at United, with 1K in global service, it's the highest status they offer. I don't have an issue reaching someone capable in a call center. I call a special number, and you talk to someone in the United States who actually has authority and is willing to help. So this is one of, I think, my main reason I stay loyal to United Airlines, and it's a big help if you can pick up the phone and actually something gets done. I have, by the way, the same status with American Airlines. I've been an executive, I don't know what they call it now, top tier, and they also have a special number, but they don't help you. So there is competition when it comes to call centers, how to treat frequent travelers, how to treat the general public, and all of this is room for improvement. And I think guys like you can definitely help to make airline know about it.
For those of us who are frequent travelers, of course, that their experience can be somewhat different. But you have to remember that the average passenger only flies once every 1 to 3 years.
Wow.
So that's a big difference.
Right.
Big difference. And not only are they going to have a lower status, perhaps, to get service, but also their ability to even know what their rights are is much, much lower. And we try to serve the whole broad spectrum of travelers. And of course, 90% of them are infrequent travelers.
No, they're fascinating subjects, and there's so much more I wanted to ask you and talk about. So hopefully we can have you back very soon. We're a little bit above our 30 minutes today, but this was interesting. So what I'm taking away from our conversation is to plan your Thanksgiving trip wisely. I like the idea of booking on an early flight. So if there is a delay, you can get on a later flight. Or even if you have a long distance flight, like what we do here from Hawaii, I always, if I have the time, plan to just stay a night at the airport hotel. It's fun. You can maybe see something from the city and you don't have to worry about all the stress changing planes, but it depends really on your schedule, how busy you are and what you want to do. But Paul, you have the last word, and yes, you have my full endorsement for our listeners and viewers to go to flyersright.org, I believe, right?
And, yes, flyersrights.org, and on social media, we're at Flyers Rights. And I must say, Jorgen, hats off to you for what you do at eTN, because it's very important, and you have in many ways made the information much more broadly available than it otherwise would be. We really thank you for that.
No, thank you, Paul. And if you stay on just one more second, but for everyone else, if you watch this and you wanted to watch it again, if you came in the middle of the thing, just stay tuned. Chances are we're going to repeat it for the next 24 hours. And then, of course, you can always find it on the breakingnewsshow.com. You will see an article on eturbonews.com. And of course, our YouTube channel is there where you can see all our past interviews and sessions. And Paul has been a guest a number of times, and hopefully we're going to see you a lot more. Thank you very much. Aloha from Hawaii, and happy Thanksgiving, and travel safe. And I talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. I know it's late in the afternoon, and hearing about security in the afternoon is not the easiest topic. But I will try to make it entertaining. And my son is here, so when I talk about him, he'll try to be honest. But you'll find out what I'm going to say in just a second about that. I think it was Alan who said, or maybe it was Jeffrey, but quoted me saying, if there is no security, then you do not in the end have tourism. Okay? And Alan was one brilliant to quote me. First, a few basic concepts about security in tourism we tend to forget. The first principle that we have to remember is nobody needs to come here. Nobody needs to take a vacation. You can just as easily go to your backyard. If I'm coming here, it's because I'm choosing to come here. And that means that we have to understand that, one, we have to fight for our visitors every day, and two, that there's always somebody else who's willing to take those visitors from us. If we do not have a safe environment, in the end, they will end up going someplace else. Now, that doesn't happen immediately. There's a lag time. But once it happens, it takes a long time to win your reputation back. Second principle. In tourism, if we do 10 things in the world of tourism, and 9 of them are right, and 1 of them is wrong, the visitor tends to remember the 1 thing that's wrong. The visitor does not think about the 9 things that we did correctly. That's a major problem. Because we only need 1 incident to destroy us. Now, in the world of tourism, the further away it is, when there's a negative incident, and the longer you are from that point, it seems worse. In other words, if there's an incident that takes place in Bali, the local population very quickly will recover from that incident. But by the time it gets to Malaysia, it sounds worse. By the time it gets to CNN or the BBC or whatever it is, Francois, you know what? It sounds a lot worse. By the time it gets to the United States, regime works, and it will last long. Is willing to forgive us when it's something by nature. The public is not willing to forgive us when it's something done by human beings. So in the case, for example, of Thailand, with the tsunami, fairly quickly, Thailand recovered. No one blamed Thailand for the tsunami, but they should have, because they had bad risk management. On the other hand, if you have a bombing or a series of bombings, that can take a very long time to recover. Now, there are two parts of tourism security. There are really three or four, but I'm going to first start on two. One is the issue of crime, and two is the issue of terrorism. This comes in and out as it chooses. If not, I'll just scream. There's also other parts to it, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But we should not confuse issues of crime with the issues of terrorism. In the world of crime, the criminal wants tourism to be successful. Think about it. If there are no tourists, then I have no victims. If you go to a fair or you go to a sporting event, I can't pickpocket you if you don't come. So the tourism industry is essential for the crime industry. On the other hand, in the world of terrorism, I want to destroy the industry. And I'll go over that in a few reasons why. One has a relationship which is parasitic. In other words, it lives off of it. And in the world of terrorism, it's destructive. It's a cancer. And so those are two very different types of elements. Now, I only have a little time, so I'm going to go over three parts today. One, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what tourism security is. Secondly, I'm going to talk to you about the visitor and a little bit of the sociology of a visitor. And then I'll give you some practical events. I don't like pushing books, but when I trained police, this is the book I wrote on tourism-oriented policing. Tourism. So I'll just leave it up here if anybody wants to look at it. It's one of the various books that I've written for police officers around the world. There are three major groups of people who work in tourism security. Public officials, meaning some form of law enforcement. Private security, which is a security organization. And the public. For example, you have many volunteers who work in helping police and helping private security. In Hawaii, for example, we have what's called the Aloha Patrol, which is something I started in 1995, which is senior citizens, people of 90 or about 55 or above, who are able to be the eyes and ears of the police. So that's the third part. Now let's talk for just a second what tourism security is. I said to you, nobody has to come here. Nobody has to go on vacation. The first rule of thumb is that visitors leave their common sense at home. Now that seems like saying they're stupid. Well, at some level, we act in very strange ways when we travel. But it's not illogical. If I didn't think it was safe to come to Bali, I wouldn't come. You might not, if I offered you a free trip to Afghanistan, and you're a woman, you might not choose to be with the Taliban. So people, when they come to a location, they believe that where it is safe. If it's safe, they believe they put their defense mechanisms down. Secondly, when we travel, we're tired. Where does the word travel come from in the English language? Does anybody know? Chavai, that's right. And the word chavai, which means work, comes from the Latin word tupelos, which means a pitchfork in your rear end. The travel is to work. It took me 34 hours to get here. Believe me, that was work. You get here, you're not thinking, you're tired, you put your phone down, you don't know where your passport is. You let your defenses fall. On top of that, most airlines believe we're overweight, and so they want to help us by not feeding us, right? We want to make sure you eat the least possible. You come dehydrated, tired, and God forbid you arrive before 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you get to the hotel, and what does the hotel say? We're very sorry, your check-in is at 4 o'clock. You are now a refugee money. Especially if you're traveling from the United States, for example, to Europe. All the planes arrive at 6 in the morning. What do? And then what time does the hotel kick you out? 11 o'clock in the morning. And you can't leave until 8 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night. You know what? Once again, you're a refugee with money. So you can understand why people let their defenses down. When we travel, therefore, we tend to forget where we are and we don't think. Secondly, when we travel, we tend to be anomic. Now, if you're not used to the word anomic, it's the opposite of alienation. Let me explain a little bit what I mean by that. We don't know the local language. We don't know what the customs are. How much do you tip? I was in Istanbul airport yesterday, and every time I walked into the men's room, some man ran to open the door for me to the toilet. Am I supposed to tip him or not tip him? How much am I supposed to tip him? What's the proper amount? Is it 10%, 15%, 20%, 25%? I don't know the rules. And so what happens is I end up in confusion. Now that's very typical of the type of tourism. And so people don't quite understand where they are. Now on top of that, often we are in a sense of, we want to follow the rules, but we don't quite know. Now that's the opposite of being anomic. My son Nathaniel's here. When he was a little boy, I had a rule that you had to make your bed before you had breakfast. Now I was pretty loose on exactly what that meant, but I couldn't see the sheets, I declared it done. So Nathaniel, who today is a defense lawyer, one day said to me, you may not remember this, but I said, you have to make your bed. And he said, I have declared my room an independent country, and you need a visa to come in. I had two options. I could either dominate, I am the father and you will do what I want, or I could figure out a way around it. So I looked at him and he said, you're right, you're an independent country and I'm cutting off foreign aid. Can't use my electricity, can't use my phone, no food, no water. Nathaniel surrendered in about 1 minute. Now, why am I telling this to you? Because part of tourism security is the ability to use humor or to, when faced with an absurdity, go to a higher level of absurdity. The first rule of tourism security is don't get excited. Figure out a way to bring the visitor in rather than expel the visitor from. Thirdly, when we travel, we tend to drop our inhibitions. We tend to drink more than we normally do. We tend to experiment with drugs. We tend to be rude. Why? Think about it. I live in a town of about 80,000 people. If I'm rude to somebody, I'm going to see them at the supermarket. I'm going to see them when I'm driving. I'm going to see them all over town. But if I'm here for 3 days and I'm rude to the police officer or I'm rude to somebody else, I'm never going to see you again. So I'm really mad at somebody at home, but you know what? I take it out on people here. So one of the things we have to teach police is how do you operate with people who tend to drop their inhibitions? They want to experiment. A perfect example. We know that at convention, not at this one, but at major conventions, there's a higher level of cheating on your spouse. Now when I've studied that, You know I'm right. When I study that, I point out to people, they'll say to me, I'm really not cheating. I go, why? Because I'm 1,000 miles or 1,000 kilometers from my wife. I go, oh, I'm a rabbi, but I didn't know that marriage vows are only good for 999 miles. 1,000 miles, do what you want. And then I look at them and I say, so if you're cheating and you're 1,000 miles from your wife, how far is she from you? And what? My wife won't cheat on me. I go, why not? You're cheating on her. But we know that people, when they travel, drop their inhibitions. And therefore, we have got to be prepared to deal with that particular problem. Now, when we travel, our stress level goes up. Almost anything sends us into a tizzy. And we're supposedly on vacation. What does the word vacation mean? The word vacation comes from the French word also, vacances, to empty your mind. I am paying you to take care of me. That's the purpose of a vacation. I think 50 weeks a year. For 2 weeks a year, I don't want to think. I'm paying you to think for me. The most minor event becomes a stress level. And therefore, we have to be able to deal with how do we lower that stress. Now, interestingly enough, men and women have different concepts of what a vacation is about. The average man looks at vacation and says, okay, I'm coming to Bali, I want to do A, B, C, D, E, F, and if he has 10 things and does 9 of them, success. But they're usually very specific programs. On the whole, and I'm not being sexist, just realistic, many women, when they travel with their husband or with their boyfriend or whatever, also have a list. But usually the first 9 on the 10 is, let's talk about our relationship. Do you love me? How can we make our relationship better? And the average man is thinking, lady, if I didn't love you, you wouldn't be in the car. If I didn't love you, you wouldn't be in a hotel room. And think about it. At home, we live parallel lives. We're with our spouse, our family, sometime, but then you go to do television, one goes to wash the dishes, one goes to mow the lawn, whatever it happens to be. What happens on vacation? I'm going to spend 24 hours with you, 7 days a week, in one hotel room with nothing more than one television. Do you know what that turns into? Chaos. Why am I telling that to you? Because the longer a vacation, the higher the probability of domestic violence. And there's nothing that is more dangerous from the perspective of policing than domestic violence. So one of the things I have to teach police is how do you get around the issue of domestic violence when it comes to travel. Remember, that person is drinking, that person may be on drugs, that person can't get away from his or her spouse, that person is annoyed, that person is upset. Voila, you got a crisis on your hands. Last but not least, in this very quick concept, is the issue of time. 99% of all tourism crises have to do with time. Why are people upset in an airport? Oh my God, I'm going to miss my flight. Why? It's not that they're upset about waiting to go through the line. If they're worried about what do I do if I miss my flight, which means I miss my next flight and I don't get home to get to work. If you can solve the problem of time, you can solve any problem. So the issues of time. I'm going to tell you a very quick story about a gentleman by the name of Reuben Greenberg. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of him or not. He was the chief of police of Charleston, South Carolina. He was, Charleston, South Carolina is the #1 tourism city in the United States. It used to not be. It was a terrible city. And it was the police department that turned Charleston from a negative into a positive. Now let me tell you a little bit about Reuben Greenberg. He did not have an easy life. First of all, Charleston is a southern city with a lot of prejudice against racial prejudice. Reuben Greenberg was black. He was also an Orthodox Jew. He was also a police officer. When you are black and you are Jewish and you are the head of the police and you got to deal with the Ku Klux Klan or other white racists, you got a problem. He was able to actually get the support of white racists. How did he do it? He understood time. The first thing he said is, Charleston, South Carolina is so safe that if you get robbed while you're here, our police officers are carrying checkbooks and they will write a check for up to $400. And everyone thought he was crazy. And I remember calling Charleston and saying, how much money are you losing? And they said to me, last year we lost $4,000, but we made $500,000 on that. Is it worth investing $4,000 to make $496,000? The answer is absolutely yes. Charleston, because of Charleston police and the use of good tourism policing, went from probably the worst tourism city in the United States to the best. It now is a center for weddings from around the world, and many people from Japan come to get married in Charleston, South Carolina. They turned the city into total charm. Now that's by understanding what he understood was, one, people are not so upset about the loss of a camera. They're upset about sending in the documentation to the insurance company. They're upset about the time it takes to recover. What did he do? He took the element of time out. And by taking the element of time out, he was able to take the stress down, he was able to take the inhibitions down, he was able to take the anomic behavior down, he was able to take the fact that people had lost their minds when they were traveling to begin with. He understood the principles of basic tourism security and how that changes. But you cannot create tourism security if you don't understand first the tourist and understand the mindset of the people you're working with. What is tourism security? Well, the first thing is, whom are we protecting? One, we're obviously protecting visitors. But not all visitors are good. Some visitors come to be criminals. So we have to teach our police how to distinguish between the good tourists and the bad tourists. That's a very different type of concept. Secondly, tourism security is all about protecting the people in the tourism industry. It is dangerous often to work in a hotel. It can be dangerous to work as a waiter and you're carrying money at night to the bank. It can be dangerous to work as a taxi driver or an Uber driver. We have to figure out ways to protect the people who work in the industry because, again, not all tourists are good. Around the world, I'm sure this doesn't happen in Bali, but around the world, a housekeeper in a hotel has a higher probability of being assaulted than a police officer. Think about it. How many people wake up in the morning and say, I think I'll go rape a police officer? Very few. But how many people in the tourism industry work in hotels and they're illegal immigrants? Are they part of trafficking? Are they part of sex exploitation? And those people are afraid to speak to the police because they're afraid if they announce who they are, they're going to lose their livelihood. And so once again, they're easy victims. And we have to understand that. Next, tourism security is about taking care of location. How many people decide to take a towel as a souvenir from a hotel? Or whatever little thing it is? Well, Well, you know, one towel is not going to break the Marriott Hotel. But if everybody takes a towel, now you have a tremendous amount of pilferage. If everyone decides to steal salt shakers, or people on planes will say, I'm just taking a blanket as a souvenir. No, you're stealing. That blanket doesn't belong to you. And therefore, protecting a plane is just a location in the air. If we don't protect that part of the tourism industry, it can't survive economically. And therefore, we have to come up with ways to be able to do that. We have to protect in tourism security the economy. Tourism is all about being a business. And a business does not survive if it does not have a profit. It goes out of business. And if you have pilferage, or if you have a crime, or whatever it happens to be, your business is not going to survive. So there has to be a connection. And last but not least, we have to protect reputation. Remember, I started off saying, when an event takes place, the further you are from it, the longer it lasts and the worse it seems. Well, you know what? If you're coming to a place like Bali, you're traveling a long way to get here. So that means if there's an incident in Bali, by the time it gets to Australia, by the time it gets to the United States, we have a very different situation. It sounds like the whole island is in flames. It may not be, but by the time the media, which is not always honest, gets to some of this, they exaggerate. I work in Mexico. The difference between Mexico and Costa Rica. In Costa Rica, if I shoot you, it'll be on the last page on a small little article. In Mexico, if I sneeze, there'll be a headline saying, possible biochemical attack in Mexico City. That's a difference. Now, to give you one idea just how important tourism security is, and Jens and I were speaking about this at lunch a little bit, I'm just going to focus in on the Caribbean for just a few moments. The Caribbean is consistently losing market share. Why? There are really 4 reasons. One reason is that the climate in the Caribbean is irregular. From July through November, you can be wiped out by a hurricane. And therefore, to spend a lot of money and to be wiped out by a hurricane, you don't want to go. People don't want to chance it. 2, the Caribbean is overpriced. For what you get, it's not worth it. 3, customer service is horrendous. I'm in the Caribbean all the time, and I often feel when I'm paying that I'm the enemy instead of the customer. But those 3 things are not the key element to losing market share. The real element is the lack of safety in the Caribbean. When I'm in Curacao on a Thursday afternoon, I know the jewelry store below the Marriott is going to get robbed. Why? Because every Thursday it gets robbed. It's just part of the normal cycle. When people are afraid of being shot on the street, when people are afraid they're going to be robbed, they don't want to come back. And those incidents travel quickly. How do people, the wealthier you are, the more education you have, the less you believe the written word, and the more you believe word of mouth. Think of an election. If you get some pamphlet, you look at it and throw it away. But if your friend sits down with you and says, vote this candidate and not that candidate, you're going to pay a lot more attention to it. If someone comes back from a place and says, it was wonderful, that's great word of mouth advertising. If someone comes back and says, yeah, it's okay, but you know, I really was afraid to go out after 8 o'clock at night, that's not such good advertising, to say the least. So that means we have to come up with ways to be able to determine that. I'm Jewish, our national sport is talking, so I have to be careful. How much time do I have? Just keep going? I'm finished. You tell me I'm done. All right. I'll just give you just 1 or 2 quick things, and because Jeffrey told me I'm done, I'm done. It's all right. He's Jewish too, so it's all right. You're a Jewish atheist. a few things we need to work with. One, you cannot have tourism security if you do not have a good responsibility with the courts. You have to have, if the police officer arrests you and the courts let you out, you've wasted your time. Two, you have to have good signage. For example, I admit I've only been here a day, but I've not seen one sign telling me where a police department is. Or if I lost my passport, what do I do? In other words, it is important that people know what to do in an emergency. And an emergency for me is different than an emergency for a local person from Bali. I don't have a bank here. I need a passport to get on my plane home. If my credit card doesn't work, I'm out of money. Those are key elements that a local person is not in quite the same situation. So we need to have ways of helping people to find. Now, security is not only negative, it's also positive. So I'm going to end with a story and a quote. And this is a quote, a story that took place in Disneyland. The officer, I'll tell you his name was Wiggins. And one day he saw a woman, he worked at Disneyland, at Disney World, Disneyland in California. And he saw a woman sitting down and crying. And he went up to her, he's a police officer, he said, "Ma'am, what's the problem?" And she said, "I lost my passport." He said, "Did someone steal it?" "No, I just lost it." So she wasn't accusing anybody of a crime, but she lost her passport. He said, "What can I do?" She said, "I called my embassy, my consulate in Los Angeles. It's 4 o'clock and they told me they close at 5 and they will do nothing to help me." He said, "Don't worry, I will get you there." Because he was a tourism police officer, he had the right to make a decision on the spot. He took her in a patrol car, drove from Anaheim to Los Angeles, got there at 4:50, like 10 minutes, walked into her country's consulate and said, "Here she is, give her a passport." And she got a temporary passport to go home. Let me ask you, what was her opinion of the United States after that? Pretty high. What's her opinion of her own country? Pretty low. That's what tourism security is all about. It means changing things so that you leave a positive image in the person's mind rather than a negative. Now, some of the people told me this morning that I should give some sort of quote in Hebrew. So as you know, who started the tourism industry? You all know that. It was Moses. He took the first group tour from Egypt. It took 40 years, but he got there. And at the end of the tour, he said, "Hine natati lefanechem et chayim v'et hamovet, uvachartem b'chayim." Now, some of you, your Hebrew might be a little bit weak, so I'll translate. "Behold, I'm putting before you life or death. Choose life." That's what tourism security is all about. Choose life. When we choose security, when we choose safety, we're choosing life for the tourism industry. Thank you.
And the police just came to arrest everyone, so please stay inside. And we're going to start our session with Dr. Peter Tarlow. He brought his son, who is a criminal attorney from Texas. So if anyone needs any help, we got it covered. Peter, where are you? Okay, this is our attorney. His rate is about $1,500 an hour, and he takes cash.
All right, thank you, Jürgen. Yeah, we would like to invite Bapak Hari. He is the director of Vital Project and Object Security from Bali Government Police Office. And of course, this workshop on the safety and security with Dr. Peter Tarlow, along with her son, Nathanael.
I'm just going to wait till the police are able to come up here.
Yeah.
So if my Canadian friends would let him, if my Canadian friends would be kind enough to. If my Canadian friends, si mes amis canadiens voulaient, merci, venir ici. This is going to be an interactive session. So if I can get people to come as close as possible, or at least somewhat in range, you're going to enjoy it more. So this is going to be a three-part session. The first part is I'm going to ask you some questions, and we're going to, hopefully there's another microphone that we can pass around. The second part is that we're going to talk a little bit about law and tourism and tourism safety. And then third part will be how to train your police force and how to determine what your priorities are. So we'll do it that way in three different parts. But the first part, and do we have someone with an extra microphone so people can go around? Hello, Jürgen or somebody? So what I'm going to ask you to do, what I'm going to ask, starting to do, is I'd like you to not, one, we've never taken the time to introduce each other, but secondly, tell me what you know or don't know or would like to know about tourism security. Because as you heard me speak yesterday, without security, there is no tourism. It will fall apart. But tourism security is very wide. It touches everything from medical issues to issues dealing with hotels. It deals with safety. It deals with security. I went through this hotel, and I hope I don't insult anybody by saying it, but if you had a good tourism security police department here, you would have picked up a number of safety irregularities. For example, when you go to the 6th floor to eat lunch, notice how slippery those floors would be if it's wet, and they're all the same color. That means it would be very easy for somebody to fall, and it's a hard marble. In the same way, think about the signage at this hotel and how hard it is to get around. Now those are, or if you're, at least in my bathroom, not only does the water go all over the place, but the floor is marble and it's incredibly easy to slip and break your head. Now, those are basic things that a good police department would indicate. One of the things a good tourism police department does, it knows the name of every manager of a hotel. It has gone through the hotel. It can evacuate the hotel in under 2 minutes. It knows exactly what problems are there and not there. That's just hotels. I'm also talking about attractions. I'm talking about restaurants. I'm talking about people on the street. I'm talking about airports. When I came into the airport, I never saw a police officer. I had no idea where, and luckily somebody met me. But if somebody had not met me, I would have not known where to go. The airplane gets you to the airport, but it's not the airline's responsibility to get you to the street. And therefore, that becomes an issue. In many parts of the world, when you get off of an airplane, you end up having a mass of people coming up to you. For example, in San Jose, Costa Rica, I'm constantly seeing people, especially women travelers, in tears. Because come here, I'm pushing you this way, that way. It doesn't work. If I cannot tell you how often I have stood at San Jose Airport because I speak Spanish and say, don't worry, I'll take care of you. I'll help you go where you go. That's part of tourism safety. Tourism safety refers also to how good your signage is, how simple it is to drive. If you, as someone who's not used to driving on the left-hand side, they're confused. and yet there were very few signs. So we're talking a major area. We're talking about health. We're talking about the ability that if I get sick, who's going to help me? Each one of those are essential parts of tourism safety. So I'd like to begin with my friend from Slovenia, and I'm going to go through. Would you tell me something you'd like to know about tourism security? Tell us your name. I don't know where the guy is for the microphone, so I'll just do it.
My name?
Yes, you know your name, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Tanja Mihalic from Slovenia.
And what's one thing you'd like to know about tourism security?
Will they help me?
Okay. What does she mean by what will they help me? In other words, if I'm a tourist, am I in the same situation as a local person? Absolutely. I lose my passport. What do? All of a sudden, my credit card gets stolen. How do I handle it? Someone has picked my pocket. Where do I go? Those are all issues. Notice, when Jürgen began, he said, the police are here. We won't arrest you. What is the problem? We have to create positive images of the police, not negative. And how often do I see parents saying, if you're a bad boy or you're a bad girl, I'm going to call the police. Right away, you're creating a negative image. So therefore, we have to get beyond that negative image to create an image where the police, one, serve and only then protect. But the first part of tourism security is serving, then protecting. Okay, we're going to have my friend here from Montenegro. Something you'd like to learn about tourism security?
Yes, so Alexandra from Montenegro. I really like this issue about security, and I would like to know like the difference between regular police and tourism police, because in many countries I've seen that there is tourism police
Yes.
On sites.
The question was, what is the difference between regular police and tourism police? It's very similar to medicine. Everyone who becomes an MD, a doctor, has gone through medical training. But then some people are specialists when it comes to the foot or the heart or the liver or the brain or whatever it happens to be. In the same way, everyone who goes through policing is a police officer. Everyone is a police officer. Now we have specialization. Some police, and then we have subspecialization. So we have, for example, a tourism police officer knows how do you handle a crowd? How do you control a football game? How do you know hotel security? How do you know working with a foreign tourist? In other words, they are specialists within the world of policing. So it's not that they're less police. They are full police officers, but who are specialists in the area of visitors. So very good question.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, ask.
As far as I know, we don't have it in Montenegro.
No, but we're going to have it.
Okay. Yes, I hope.
We're going to have it. Yes, and get next people here. Yeah. Would you like to answer the question or tell? Okay. Let's go to. What would you like to know about tourism police? Sir, does he speak English? I don't know what he said, but that's okay. What would you like to know about security?
When I can travel safely solo. I mean, I'm a woman, and if I go somewhere, I need to feel safe.
Excellent point. By the way, where those of you who are, here's a piece of information. Who is more at risk, a man or how many people think women when they travel? How many people think men? No, how many people? Let's try again. How many people think it is more dangerous for a single woman to travel than a single man? If you think so, raise your hand. How many people think it's more dangerous for a man than for a woman? And you know what? And you're all wrong. The number one group of victims tends to be men, not women. What age group? What is the most dangerous time? When you're under 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 50, or 50 and above? How many people think under 20? No one. How many people think 20 to 30? 1, 2, okay, 3. Good. How many people think 30 to 50? How many think 50 and above? How many people think old people like me? The answer is 20 to 30. The person who is most at risk is a male traveling by himself between the ages of 20 and 30. Why? You tell me. Why is that? Okay, I'm going to help you. You have an idea?
In my opinion, at that age, people are open to try new things, include illegal things. That's why it makes them...
You're very much on point. Notice, most people, first of all, women are smarter than men. They think. Men tend not to think. Secondly, if you have sons and daughters, how do we raise them differently? When Nathaniel would go out to play, I'd say, okay, go out to play, be safe, come home at 6 o'clock. When my daughter went out to play, I said, don't speak to anyone. I gave all sorts of instructions. Young girls from the time they're born are taught safety. We rarely teach safety to young men. The group that believes it is infallible, that it cannot be defeated, that it's stronger than anyone, are young men. So they get themselves in trouble. But notice, the statistics do not tell the truth. Women will call a police department and say that they had whatever problem. Men do not say it. So most police statistics are wrong. I'm not saying that the police are lying. I'm saying they do not get all the information. A matter of fact, for every crime reported to police, there are probably 10 crimes that have not been reported. So if you read that it's 1 in 10,000, it's probably 10 in 10,000. In other words, most visitors do not report crime. Why? Think about it. If someone robs me here, do I know where to find the police? I know right now with Harry, but normally I wouldn't know. Would I know where to find a police officer? No, there are no police officers here. Do I speak the language? No. And if I'm leaving tomorrow, what is the chance, and I write a full police report, what's going to happen? Nothing. I've just wasted 3 hours of my last day in Bali accomplishing absolutely nothing. So you know what? Tourists don't go to the police. They don't report it. That's an issue. That when good tourism policing means that we find the visitor doesn't have to find us. And that's a completely different way of doing policing. Okay? So notice, the number one group, how many police departments, does your police department have a special section to take care of men? Officer Harry? Does your police department have a special section to take care of 25-year-old men? Probably not. No, I'm sure you don't. But we spend a lot of time protecting women who don't need the protection, and we spend no time protecting men who do need the protection. Notice the difference. Most crimes happen to young men. Very rarely do they happen to young women. When it happens to a young woman, they make a lot of noise. But men are ashamed that they were robbed or whatever, and therefore, you know what happens? They say nothing. For example, even in rape, Between 15 and 20% of all rapes are against men. But a man won't say it, he'll just suffer. And so the statistics do not show what the reality is. And you know the famous statement, there's lies, lies, and statistics. So you have to be really careful in what you say. This gentleman over here.
I think I would just love to learn a few instances about what might be, from your experience, critical situations that many tourists are not very aware of.
Okay, what are some of the critical situations we have? One, what happens in a natural phenomena, a natural crisis? A major rainstorm, a hurricane, an earthquake. The local person knows what to do. The visitor has no idea what to do. And if the police have not been trained in helping that person is on their own. If you're here, and God forbid there's an earthquake right now, the locals can walk home or whatever they need to do. What is going to happen? What are you going to hear on the news? Major earthquake in Bali, hundreds of people dead, thousands of people, whatever. And you know what happens? My wife sitting at home or my family sitting at home, oh my God, he's dead. But the communications has just gone down. I can't communicate. So I am not only stressed because I'm dealing with an earthquake, I'm also stressed because my family, I know my family is worried about me and I can't communicate with them. And if the electricity goes down, if you're in your own house, you know what? You can go home. What happens if the electricity goes down? No gas, no credit card, no money. I live by my credit card. So all of a sudden, my entire life is changed radically. That's just one example. I can give you hundreds, but that's just one. Next person. Would you like to? Okay, this gentleman over here.
Well, sure, it's been enlightening. So, Dr. Tarlo, I think ensuring safety of tourists is paramount to the tourist industry, right?
Yes.
Maybe I would like to hear your insights of the key challenges in regard how, well, we have talked about the communities. Let's talk about the SMEs, right? And how can SMEs play the active role in enhancing the safety? And one more, I think it's interesting because we have the government people here. And to what extent should the SMEs collaborate with local authorities or law enforcement agencies to improve the safety standards and emergency response, like you said?
Excellent question. Okay, so the first part of it is, it's a two-way street. One, a good tourism security police knows the SMEs. I know your name. I visited your store. I visited your location. You can call upon me. In other words, when you call the police, you don't know who you're getting. You could get somebody who's good, or you could get somebody who's bad. Here are two organizations that save lives: medicine and police. What's the difference, at least in the United States? If you tell me all doctors are bad, I'll say, no, that's not true, because I know my doctor's name. I know who he is. He examined me. I have a relationship. If you tell me all police are bad, I don't know who they are. I don't know their name. I've never met them. That's part of tourism policing. If you're developing an SME, the tourism police should know your name and vice versa. They should come into your store or your location. Sir, what do you need? How can I help you? Here's my telephone number. And one of the things I teach police is they give out their cell phone number. If you need something, you don't call the police station, you call me. Now that changes the entire way you see things. Okay? Okay, you're not going to ask a question. No? My friend here will definitely ask a question.
I always love asking questions.
Yes,
my
she's
whole
good.
life around that. Yeah, I believe in Socrates, always ask questions. I think the topic that was just raised brought up my interest is actually empathy. Empathy training for police, but also in industry. Empathy for other people, but also self-empathy, because police officers in particular are quite under a lot of pressure to deal with a lot of risk factors and having to deal with relationships which require empathy. And that is how important. Do you believe it? I know in Australia, a colleague of mine, police inspector, does training and has implemented that in Australia for police officers.
So there's a lot of parts to empathy. Let's talk about, for example, who is better. And again, this is a generalization. Okay, this is a generalization. On the whole, who deals better with stress, men or women? Wrong. Men. Think about it. When you go through customs, do you want a woman customs officer or do you want a male customs officer? Always a man. Why? Because women look at very particular things. Men tend to look at the broad picture. Now, on top of that, men, maybe because they're used to at home, we are trained to not listen. So if I say, where's the bathroom, sir? Where's the bathroom, sir? Where's the bathroom, sir? Where's the bathroom, sir? The woman gets frustrated in the end because she keeps listening. Men don't listen. Over there, it doesn't matter. Now, second part to this. In order to determine good police officers, again, that doesn't mean there are not women who are wonderful police officers in tourism and men who are terrible. But I'm only giving you a statistical guess, okay? The second part of picking someone is, have they studied other cultures? And the third part of this is, do you know a foreign language? One of the key elements I insist in tourism policing is making sure that everyone is at least bilingual. Better trilingual, but at least bilingual. Why? Because it's a struggle to learn to think in a different format. And therefore, if you are able, when you learn another language, it's not just to communicate, it's to understand the totality of the way that language thinks. How do you divide? In English, you can say I was, I am, I was, I will be. In Spanish, to say I was could be fui, era, tenía, tuve, hice, hacía. There are 8 ways to say I was in Spanish, and there's 1 way to say it in English. And each one of those ways is different in Spanish and a different meaning. When you learn a different language, you learn a different culture. You learn a different way to think. And therefore, good tourism policing means I can put myself in your shoes. You don't have to put yourself in my shoes. So, for empathy, 1, I want people who are able to think in other cultures. It doesn't mean that women cannot be empathetic, but on the whole, most men are not afraid to touch someone, to put their arm around someone, to show a certain amount of empathy that we don't necessarily get with women police officers. Again, I want to emphasize, that doesn't mean a woman can't do it. It just means I'm giving a statistical guess. That's all I'm giving. In the end, you have to think about the individual. Okay, so let's stay over here, and then we're going to switch over. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed. I wasn't me. Sir.
Thank you so much. But the first time, I'm very sorry if my language is not so.
I'll work with you. You'll get it good.
Yes, Dr. Charlo, what is your opinion? What is your opinion if the crime is being done by the foreign tourists?
Yes.
Because in Bali, I have data from January until the August of 2020. 23. We have other. We have 29. We have 29 cases of crime, and in September we have 6 cases of, and the suspect is
a foreigner,
foreign tourist.
Yes. Not all tourists are good. Some tourists come specifically to commit crime. Other times it's crimes of passion. One of the things we know is, for example, many tourists they want to get a new camera, so they lose their camera on purpose. In other words, and then I make a police report so that I can call the insurance company and say someone stole my camera. Other times tourists will overdrink. They will get on drugs. They will even kill each other. First rule, you must always be a police officer first. Secondly, we work with the foreign government, with the consulate. That means that the tourism police have to know all the consulates in Bali or wherever you have to work. 3, and Nathaniel's going to talk about this in just a moment, you need to understand, be able to explain local law. The law of the land is the law the tourist has to live on. So because I'm a foreigner here, does not mean that I don't follow Indonesian law. When I'm in Indonesia, I have to follow Indonesian law. Now, we have to make it clear to people what it is, and police officers have discretion. For example, let me give you a problem in my town we have with German tourists. In the United States, you cannot go to the bathroom, especially a man, in public. In other words, you have to go to a restroom. You have to go to a bathroom. But we have a problem with German tourists who, if they need to urinate, they just go behind the building and they urinate. Now that is illegal in the United States.
But there is many in here.
Yes, the Germans like to urinate a lot.
There are some.
Yes, it's a.
Yes, I'm very sorry that there are so many foreign tourists do that.
Yes, you're right. So this is what we do. We give, for example, I'm just giving, many German tourists, they just don't know, okay? They're not trying to break the law. They just don't know. Maybe in Germany, people urinate on the street. I don't know. But in the United States, you can't do that. So we give a warning and we say, sir, Mr. German, you're in the United States. You must use the bathroom. You cannot do it the first time. But it's noted. We take the passport number down. If you do it a second time, you will go to jail. So that we make it clear. Now, we don't put them in jail for a long time. We put them in jail for a few hours, but it's enough to scare them. Okay? But so we have to understand what are the problems, what are the types of crime. Now, if someone urinates in public, no one's going to die. It's not like I shot you. It's just they went behind a building or a tree and urinated. So it's not, a terrible crime, but it still cannot be accepted. So we give them a warning, we teach them, and we give the warning both in English and German to make sure there's no misunderstanding. Yes, Moody.
Yeah, the challenge is what about if the challenge is in the policy, whereas yes, by law you can't do that, but then when it comes to enforcement, the policy on enforcing the consequences is not there. For example, yeah, how let's say the policing
in most countries, and I don't know Indonesia, but tourism police are given wide discretion. So it says the law may say this, but the police officer is given the chance to enforce the law or not to enforce the law as needed. So one of the things you have to do is when we develop tourism police is we have to train the police, but also train the politicians. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, questions here. And then I'm going to switch it over to Nathaniel.
Just one more, Dr. Peter
Yes.
Talo, sorry. when it comes to politician, how do we educate or train politician? Yeah, I mean, in your
It's
experience.
called elections. It's called elections. Okay?
Election. Oh, election.
Elections. In other words, I make it a major issue and I tell the politicians, oh, you're running for office? What do you know about tourism? Bali lives on tourism. Are you going to work with me or not? If not, you don't get my vote. Politicians are interested in three things: power, votes, and money. You take the votes away, there's no power or money.
Yeah, I would like to know the difference between safety and security.
Excellent question. What is the difference between safety and security? Actually, there's three terms: safety, security, and surety. So let me go over the difference. I once asked the question, I sent out a tourism newsletter that if anyone would like to get, you just let me know, it's for free. And so I asked the question, what is the difference between safety and security? I got probably 5,000 answers and everyone was different. That means nobody knows the answer. So I'm going to give you my answer, how I use it in the United States government. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It means it's what I do in the US government, nothing more. Security is when I am intentionally trying to harm you, either bodily, economically, or some form. In other words, I know that you could slip. I take away any signs saying dangerous, slippery road. I put poison in the buffet. I've done something to harm you one way or the other. Safety is something which is reflexive. In other words, I didn't see the stairs. Today, if you notice, it would be illegal in many countries. Going up and down the stage, there was no banister. If somebody tripped, they would fall. Now, if the police had been here, they would have given a fine to this hotel because you do not have stairs where there's no banister going up and down. But that's a safety issue. Nobody did it on purpose. But if there was a banister and I knew you were going to fall and I took it away, that's a security issue. Surety refers in tourism, safety, security, economic survival, and reputation. That means you have to work with somebody like Thomas Steinmetz to develop good reputation. Because if I have good safety and security and nobody knows about it, it doesn't help. So I have to have both do it and know it. Okay? So again, on the whole, safety is something that I do to myself or inadvertently. Security is something I do to you. It's causative. Okay, intentional. Now what I'm going to do first, I'm going to switch for a little while, then we're going to come back. But I'm going to ask my son Nathaniel if he would speak a little about, because we're really talking about law here. So I'm going to have him speak a little bit about law and security in tourism. And, you know, he's the Peter Tarlow new improved version.
I'm not as good looking, but I'm trying. Firstly, Nathaniel Tarlow, that's my name. I want to thank you all for having me. In particular, I want to thank Ratna for conducting the Master of Ceremonies job. I want to thank Moody for organizing this conference, and of course at her side, Ninik, wherever she is, there you are. I want to thank Thomas Steinmetz and the WTN, and I want to thank my dad. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some legalities and also about security, and we'll touch on some things. I'll try to organize some of what we've talked about in this conference in something of a chronologically intelligent way. So here in Indonesia, you have from Sumatra all the way to Papua, a large archipelago of islands with different languages. And one thing this country has done is made sure that there is a national language that unites everybody. And that is, of course, Bahasa Indonesia. So I want to say that the word security in Bahasa, it's securitas. Mentalitas, mentality is securitas, is security. And I can't stress to you enough how important mentality is. So we are here in Bali, for example, and when people talk about Indonesia worldwide, if you say, for example, hey, I went to Indonesia to your friend back in your own foreign country, the first question they'll usually say is, oh, were you in Bali? Because people associate tourism to Indonesia heavily with tourism to Bali. So mentalitas, we here in Bali have to make sure that we understand that what goes on in Bali, good or bad, reflects on the entirety of the Republic of Indonesia. And therefore, you all here in Bali have a strong responsibility because you are the one carrying the Indonesian flag from a tourism standpoint throughout the whole world. If Bali is doing something right, Indonesia is doing something right. And if Bali's doing something wrong, Indonesia is doing something wrong. So I really want to impress upon everyone here today, not just from Bali, but from everywhere else in Indonesia, that it is in the entire country's best interests that Bali be a success, because this is the mirror that reflects Indonesia to the world. Now, we heard a lot about everything from climate change to capacity. Is that kapasitas in Bahasa Indonesia? We here in Bali have to think about kapasitas. And one of the things is that just as Bali is a reflection of all of Indonesia, and that's a rather limited piece of land that makes a reflection on the whole country, Bali is really largely reflected, as far as I can tell, from Uluwatu up through to Kuta, and then again, there's a pocket at Ubud. There's the whole rest of the island, and not a lot of people are getting there. So why am I talking about this? Okay, here in Bali, we have to make sure that we have the mentality to remember that capacity has the possibility to hurt the image of the island if we are too crowded in a place like the stretch from Uluwatu all the way up through Denpasar, that area. So even if you as a small or medium-sized enterprise, and beyond that, the government, the police, the tourism engine of Bali, both private sector and public sector, might just be thinking about your restaurant, your warung, your hotel. But if this area becomes too crowded and a tourist comes and said, hey, I came to Bali thinking it was going to be a peaceful, natural place, and it's so much traffic and it's so crowded, that reflects badly on the whole island and then the whole country. So it might actually make sense to promote Singaraja, or promote Ahmed, or promote Lombok, or promote Eastern Java, just to ease some of the crowding here in Bali, so Bali can protect its reputation as a peaceful place. Because we're here talking about security, and of course, Director Hari knows that if somebody is, let's say, has their purse stolen or has a motorbike accident, they're going to take home an unpleasant memory of Bali, and they might not come back. But hey, that's one reason. If they come to Bali, no motorbike accident, no loss of a purse, no loss of a mobile phone, but they just think it's too crowded or that it's too polluted or too noisy, they also might not come back to Bali. So regardless of the reason, if somebody doesn't want to come back, you don't get their business a second time, whether it's the stealing a mobile phone or whether it's just a perception that it's too crowded. So mentalitas is securitas, and we have to have the right mentality to secure, not just physically, but economically, what's going on in Bali for the sake of the island and for the sake of the country. So my dad talked about one of the mechanisms for making the law through the, of course, legal channels, through the legislative or executive powers that exist here, work to help tourism. If you, for example, as a political leader are not taking tourism seriously enough, then you as a voter should take that into account if you're living from tourism. So how do we get the attention of politicians? If you own, for example, one restaurant, you can approach a politician and say, hey, I own this restaurant. I'd like to know what's going on in this or that sector of security. What are you doing to help? Well, that's one option. What if you gather together 500 restaurants in an association, and then you approach that politician? Which is more powerful, one restaurant owner or 500 restaurant owners? So somebody or more than one person needs to do, on behalf of any sector of these small to medium-sized enterprises, some organizing to make sure that any one particular sector's interests economically are being heard by lawmakers, are getting to the desk of lawmakers. If you own a restaurant, get together with colleagues in a similar league. Let's say it's a medium-priced restaurant. Okay, fine, others in that category. And also have people from lower-priced or higher-priced restaurants join you. Yes, they might have a different market share, but people need to eat, and restaurants are in the business of feeding them. So it's very important that people in different sectors that affect tourism reach out to others and really organize collectively, because the police, for example, have a lot of work to do. They've got to keep traffic flowing. They've got to keep people physically safe. They've got to respond in the event of a crime or a natural disaster. So if you have an issue that is important to you, it's not their job to come and knock on your door and say, are you okay, all the time. They don't have the manpower for that. It's your job to make sure the police are informed about what's going on in the community. They cannot be everywhere at once. It is your job as members of the community to be the eyes and ears of the police. That's critically important. Sure, it is their job to be tapped into things, but it's your job to make their job even easier. I also want to talk about the fact that, as Director Hari has pointed out, a lot of the situations that they're having to deal with in their capacity as law enforcement are being brought up by tourists who knowingly or unknowingly are not behaving right. And I'm sorry to say that when people have a few too many bintongs, they just leave their common sense and their decency at home. And maybe a thought to consider is two things. One thing is, upon arrival in Bali, maybe a printed form, perhaps in English, maybe you could have some other languages to give to arrivals when they arrive, of just 10 rules. 10 rules to follow in Bali, and just hand them out as people wait in line to go through passport control. Some people might read them, some people might not, but let's get that information out there. And another idea would be to train ambassadors from the Balinese community to be at particular sites of touristic interest, for example, temples in Ubud or beaches here in Uluwatu. And if they see something wrong, to be trained to approach a tourist who's not behaving himself or herself and say, hey, excuse me, politely. Here in Bali, we'd ask that you not engage in this type of behavior. We're happy to have you here. We respect you. Please respect our ways. And have somebody approach and do that. It's going to seem a little weird at first, and I know Indonesians can be shy about approaching foreigners, but let's train people to do that, because if you do it in a way that is tactful and diplomatic and polite, sooner or later, that person who receives the message is going to have to make a choice. Do I want to offend my hosts, or do I want to conduct myself? And some of these people are just not doing it knowingly. So let's train a corps of ambassadors who can go to people and politely correct their behavior in a way that preserves the dignity of the people of the island and preserves the dignity of the tourist as well. Remember, we've heard speakers say to us, it's not just about the memories you take home, it's about the impression you give the locals. And we, as tourists, have a responsibility to our hosts. So let's train our hosts to train us, to gently guide us when we're not acting right. Another thing is that, what are we selling here in Bali? We are selling the beauty of the island and the culture of the island. Now, we addressed respecting the culture with the possibility of enacting a policy of giving out forms with 10 rules to follow or 10 suggestions and training some ambassadors, but we also protect the beauty of the island. So we need to impress upon everybody who's visiting this island that plastic is a problem, not just because it's unsightly on the sidewalk, but because it creates damage in the ocean. We need to impress upon people that throwing cigarette butts or whatever else they do is also a problem. It starts small, but it gets bigger. And we need to make sure that rubbish and environmental control measures are in place. Rubbish control measures and environmental control measures, excuse me. So mentalitas, of course, as I was saying, is securitas. We have to make sure that our mentality is right. And I want to impress upon the people who are in this room that We recognize here at WTN that you're here because you care about your community, you care about tourism, you care about the economy, you care about the people, and you care about the country. So you all are in a good position to reach out to people that you know through various methods, interpersonal interaction, social media, trade organizations that either exist or that you can start in order to connect and make these networks so that politicians and lawmakers can know and understand what your concerns are as people in the field, people who own restaurants, people who own tour companies, people who rent out motorbikes. It's your job to make sure that they hear you. Now, I want to take a moment also to discuss some other concerns that we are going to have to address, okay? We talked about capacity. We talked about how that impacts the environment. We talked about how that's bringing tourists to the island. I want you to understand the future is now. And I know how cliche that sounds, but two things are going on and have been going on, but are really picking up speed that I want to talk to you about. Number one is the existence of social media and what factor it plays and what role it plays in bringing people to Bali, both good and bad. And number two is the fact that emerging economies are producing a lot more tourists. When I was a child, decades ago, Indonesians really were not traveling to foreign countries. Now Indonesia is slated to be the 5th largest economy in the world by the year 2050, and you see travel agents all over Indonesia, Jakarta, here, other places, advertising trips to Europe. Years ago, you just didn't see that. If Indonesians are traveling to European countries, you can bet that other emerging economies are traveling to Bali. So tourist numbers are about to go up, way up. We talked about capacity. We need to manage that capacity. Earlier I mentioned, hey, let's promote Lombok. Hey, let's promote East Java, because this place might just get too crowded. And if it's too crowded, people will use, here it is, social media to say, hey, I went to Bali, kind of disappointed. It was so much traffic. And as I mentioned earlier, not all of Bali is Kuta. Not all of Bali is Uluwatu. Let's make sure we're spreading people out throughout Bali and throughout neighboring islands so that we preserve the reputation of this country as a peaceful, green, natural place. And if we aren't careful and we just let people come and just stay I mean, we can't force them, but we don't encourage people to go beyond certain tourist corridors and certain tourist hotspots, we're going to start losing some business and losing some reputation. And I don't want to see that. And I know that you all really don't want to see that. So there is an interest in making sure as capacity ramps up that we manage it intelligently. Now, as for social media, some people come to Bali because they saw it on Instagram. They don't even know why they come here. They just feel like they kind of have to because their friend came here. That's an opportunity. But it's also what we call in English a double-edged sword, something that can cut for you or something that can cut against you. If they come and Bali lives up to what they thought they were going to get based on social media, great, you've accomplished your mission. They came, they were happy, they go home, they tell people, oh, Indonesia was great, Bali was great. But if they come with their expectations raised from social media and we don't meet them, or we disappoint them, not only has Bali lost, some of its reputation and another repeat tourist who might not come, but Indonesia too takes a hit. So it's important that we remember we are living in a day and age where travel has never been easier, tourist numbers have never been higher, countries providing tourists that list has expanded, and social media is playing such a big role. So we can use social media, for example, to try to ease some of the congestion here by promoting some other areas in order to spread that around. In addition, places like Singaraja or places like Ahmed deserve some of these tourism rupiah as well. So let's help them get it. Let's do that. I want to again stress mentalitas is securitas. We have to make sure that we have the right mentality. And the right mentality is a community-minded mentality about Bali as a community. It's not just your restaurant, your hotel. It's your island. It's your country. And it's important that we make sure that we use networks of similarly minded people and change the thinking, change the mentalitas to protect what we have here on this island, and to encourage those who make laws and make policy to hear what those needs are. It is incumbent upon you all to connect with each other, to connect with other tourism professionals in order to safeguard this island and this country's reputation in the world. So it's going to be up to people like you all who drive this country's tourism engine to appeal to lawmakers, to hand out those forms at the airport, to train that corps of ambassadors to be at tourism sites, and to make sure that you change the culture of this island even more so to accommodate the ever-growing numbers of tourists who are arriving from different countries that before didn't produce tourists. And let's also remember, countries that haven't produced tourists in the past are producing new tourists today. And some of them are new to travel and don't always behave in a way that an experienced tourist might know already how to behave. So this is another challenge we have to face. It is incumbent upon people to make sure that they have the right way of thinking here in Bali so that they can safeguard their own economic revenue generator for themselves and for Indonesia. Are there any questions I can take? Any suggestions? Any thoughts? Anyone? Okay, thank you all for listening. I appreciate your attention.
How much time do we have, Jürgen? It doesn't matter, we can go on. Pardon? We're in Indonesia, so there's no concept of time. So by 7 o'clock, you want me to end? For those of you who are interested in tourism security, I've written about 10 books on it. I just brought one. This is Tourism-Oriented Policing and Protection Services. So this is kind of a manual for police departments and how to do tourism security, step by step. I'm gonna let, is it Chief Harry or thank you so much. I can't give it to you, it's my daughter's, but you can look at it. You can't steal it. I'll have to call the police. But you can look at it now. Yes, I would love to give it to you, but actually I didn't know I was going to be seeing you, so I grabbed my daughter's copy at home, so I had to give it back to her. So it was at least give you an idea of some of the issues. So let's talk a little bit about developing safety and security. Nathaniel brought up some of the concepts of Bali, but they're basic concepts that we need to talk about. And we started talking about some of them. Before I finish though, did anybody here have a question before I switched over? Nope, okay. So, first of all, let me go over a little bit again, the basis of tourism security. You're going to protect the visitor, and who do you protect the visitor from? One, we protect visitors from themselves. Most visitors don't think. So we do stupid things. We leave our telephone on the table. We leave the doors open. By the way, Officer Harry, what group is most prone to be robbed when they travel? What profession? Take a guess. Police officers. Yes, yes. Police officers believe they cannot be robbed. But when they travel, you're not a police officer. And so what happens is when I'm at police conferences, the police leave their doors open at a hotel. The police walk around. How many police officers walk around with their phone in their back pocket when they travel? What is the easiest place to steal a phone? Back pocket. How many police officers keep their wallet in their back pocket when they travel? What is the easy, pardon? Yes, what is the easy? Yes, it should be in your front pocket with 2 rubber bands around it. Okay? But notice, people don't think. So 1 is protecting visitors against themselves. 2 is protecting visitors against the locals. Because if I want to rob you and I'm a local, I speak the local language. I know the local layout. You don't. 3, you want to protect visitors against other visitors. There, for example, if you have a festival, suppose, I don't know, do you have festivals here in Bali? Do you have festivals in Bali? Okay, if you have a festival, you know what? And I'm a pickpocket, what do? No. The first thing I do is I visit that festival twice, so I know where the police are, I know how often you come, I study you. And then when I'm going to attack, I'm still a visitor, I'm a tourist, but you know what? I'm coming for the purpose of robbing. And terrorism, which is the other side of tourism security, no terrorist ever goes just accidentally. They study the location. I know how many police there are. I know where they are. I know how often they're on patrol. I've studied, I know their schedule. And you know what? Often the police just publish it. It doesn't take much to figure it out. But I'm going to know every single thing about you. So if I'm a tourist who comes for the purpose of harming, I don't come just once. I don't come twice. I come 3 times. For example, in India, you remember the terrible things that took place in Mumbai. I was there the year before. I said to them, you have to allow the police to be in the hotel. The head of the hotel, which is the Gates of India, said, no, I don't want any police officers in the hotel. It'll scare people. What happened? The terrorists came, they paid for rooms, they stayed there 3 days, they studied everything about the hotel, and then when they attacked, the police were on the outside and knew nothing, and the terrorists were on the inside and knew every part of that hotel. Who had the advantage? Obviously the terrorists. Exactly. It doesn't matter where it is. It's always the same pattern. In a case of when I'm coming to do harm, either on the criminal side or the terrorist side, I study it. I'm a professional. Let me show you how professional they are. In Las Vegas, I ran a tourism security conference for 27 years. COVID killed it in the end, but up till COVID, we lasted 27 years. We have people from police officers from 42 countries. This year, I'll be in United Arab Emirates, speaking to 20,000 police officers at the International Police Conference. Every year, I had a pickpocket who was going to attack a police officer. I told the police officer, he's going to steal your watch, your wallet, and your telephone. So you now know exactly what I'm going to do. I told the police officer, this is the man who's going to do it. So you know who's going to attack you, and you know what he's going to attack you. And then I told that gentleman there, you have 5 minutes to do the robbery. So you know the time frame. Who do you think won every year? The police officer or the pickpocket? The pickpocket. Because they're truly professionals, that's all they do. That's all they do, they study it. If you go to jail in Las Vegas and you talk to the pickpockets, they want you to arrest them. You know why? It's a convention. They plan when they're going to get arrested. They know who's going to get arrested. And that's where the city of Las Vegas pays for them to be able to talk to each other. And they share notes. It's not, we think of criminals as just doing something, blah, blah, blah. No, these are hardened professionals. They know exactly what they're doing and they know exactly how they're doing it. And it's thought through. And the difference is we give very little training to police and we give a tremendous amount. I don't train them, but they have a tremendous amount of training to the criminals. Notice the difference between the two. Notice the difference between the two. So first, we protect the tourist against him or herself. Secondly, we protect the tourist against other visitors. Thirdly, whom else is a threat to the tourist? Whom else is a threat to the tourist? Have any of you ever been on a cab? Anybody ever take a taxi? The tourism industry steals. The tourism industry steals. A taxi cab driver is part of the tourism industry. In Honolulu, I did a study on if you go in Waikiki from the airport to the main hotel section of Honolulu. When I did the study, I don't know what the cost is right now, but it should cost you someplace around $40 to get from the airport to the hotel section. If you spoke English with a sort of Hawaiian accent, it was about $40. Could be 38 or 42, depending on but in that range. If you spoke English, but with not a local accent, it was about 45. If you spoke English with a heavy accent, it was about $49. If you didn't speak English, it was about $50. Now, that's only stealing $10, but that's per ride. And that's called a crime of dispersion. In other words, it's a very small crime, but it's passed through the system. So nobody is going to go and write to the police and say, he stole $10 from me. But let's say if you have 10 passengers a day, that's $100. 6 days a week, $600. $600 times 4 weeks a month, $2,400. Let's just say they only work 10 months, $24,000. Multiplied by 5,000 police officers, now we're in the millions of dollars. And it gnaws at the system and destroys it. Next, or for example, I buy a tour. I wanted to see Bali. I did this in Canada when I was training for the Olympics. So I take a tour in Vancouver, Canada. It's a 2-hour tour. So we left, we started taking the tour. And about after half an hour, he says, we're now taking a break at this store. And he keeps me at that store for at least half an hour. And we don't leave until we buy things at his stupid store, which I then discover is owned by his cousin. Very common. You know what? That's stealing. I paid for 2 hours. I ended up with nothing more than 1 hour. It's a gentle stealing. It's a stealing. By the way, hotels do the same. I pay for a full night, 24 hours at a hotel, but I can't check in till 4 and I got to leave at 11. They just took how much of my time away? That's stealing. We don't say it, but it is. And then every little thing you need, I charge you extra. How many things? Oh, well, did you want a pillow? That'll be extra. Did you want a blanket? That'll be extra. Now, I'm exaggerating, but you understand my point. How often in the tourism industry do you buy the basic thing, and then there are all these little extras, we call visitor plus? That's stealing. We have to, a good tourism police officer knows the law, and he knows when to crack down on the tourism industry. That's part of the training that you have to give. We have to train tourism police against not only protecting against other visitors, protecting against themselves, protecting against the industry, but also protecting people who are working in the industry. Who has a more dangerous job, a police officer or a hotel maid? The hotel maid. How many people are going to rob a police officer who's on duty or rape him. Very few. But hotel maids are often working illegally. They don't have permission, and they're afraid to report anything. And so they're easily put into situations that are very dangerous. So when we're doing protecting visitors, it's not just the visitor against himself or herself, the visitor against other visitors, the visitor against the industry. It's also the visitor can be a threat to the people working in the industry. In airlines, one of the things that flight attendants report is that they are sexually harassed by passengers. The passenger accidentally hits them in the rear end. But it's maybe one time, okay. 2 times, it's already a pattern. 3 times, it's now assault. How many people turn on flight attendants and start screaming at them? And you know something? If the plane is late, the flight attendant cannot make that plane go any faster. No matter what she or he does, that plane is going to arrive when it's going to arrive. But people start screaming at them and haranguing them. Those are the types of things that we have to teach, and not only teach, but we have to learn. Now, one of the things I hear in tourism security is that we have to teach the public. You know what? You're not going to teach the public, ever. It's never going to happen. Why is it not going to happen? Because I'm on vacation. I've emptied my mind. I don't want to think. I want you to think. So you know what? Good tourism policing knows how to structure it so that when the visitor is not thinking, I'm thinking before it happens. That means you have to know enough psychology, enough sociology, enough counseling to be able to deal with reality on a regular basis. Okay. The next thing our police have to know is how to protect property and reputation. Now, somebody today was telling me a very beautiful story about this, well, you know who she was, but she's from Australia. And she was in Tasmania, which is either at the bottom of the world or the top of the world, depending upon which way you call the globe. And she sees a couple very upset and crying. And the waitress brings them over to speak to a young man. And he seems to settle them down. And so she's not here now, but our friend said, could I ask what's going on? Well, there was no hotel space at all in Tasmania, 0. And this was a couple from France. And so they spoke to the local police officer, and he said they were going to just sleep on the street or sleep in a car. There was nothing they could do. The police officer said, don't worry, I'll bring you home to my house. You'll sleep in my house. Think how he changed the reputation. Could that, if you were a French couple, could you imagine a French police officer bringing you home? Never. But this guy, with one action, those people went all over social media to talk how great the Tasmanian police were. Now, it's a little dangerous to bring somebody home you don't know, and I understand that, but I guess Australia's safe, so he didn't worry. Or he saw that they were in terrible shape. The first part of good policing is empathy when you're in tourism. It's the love of the human being. In the Bible, it says, V'ahavta l'reacha k'mocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. But it does not say that. That's a mistranslation. What it says when it says V'ahavta l'reacha k'mocha is love your neighbor for your own sake. When I am good to you, I'm helping myself. I'm not just helping you, I'm making a stronger society. The English mistranslates the Hebrew. But the concept is the beginning of policing. When I treat you well, I have a better chance of you treating other people well. It doesn't mean you'll always do it. There are some people who are just miserable. I work in the prison system in the United States. And one day we had we had a hot dog festival. And all the inmates could have as many hot dogs as they wanted. You want 10 hot dogs, 10 hot dogs. 20 hot dogs, 20 hot dogs, as many as you want. 3 of my prisoners stole hot dogs. So I said to myself, this makes no sense because 1, all the hot dogs are free. 2, I can't sell them to you because you can have as many free hot dogs as you want. And 3, you can't store hot dogs. What are you gonna do? Dig a hole in the ground? So I said to them, why did you steal the hot dogs when the hot dogs have no value? And their answer was, it wasn't any fun getting it for free. We wanted to be able to have a challenge of stealing. Those people should stay in jail because I will never reform them. On the other hand, there are people that I can work with who can make a mistake, but I can help them become productive citizens again. So we have to be able to, in good policing, understand those roles. Now, tourism policing is very complicated. Again, I've written 10 books on it. Each book is different. I could lecture you for 2 hours or 5 hours or 10 hours. Actually, when I teach police courses, they're often for 5 days or 6 days. It means understanding how airports work, transportation works, how hotels work, how airlines work, how restaurants work, how the law works, how ports work if you have seaports. Each one of those is different. It means understanding the culture of where your people are coming. If in Montenegro you mainly get Europeans, that's one culture. If you're getting Russians, that may be a different culture. If you're getting people from the Middle East, that's a different culture. If you go and you see people from Japan who come out of a society that's very honest, if you're in Hawaii, people will say, oh, I don't know how much it is. Take what you need. In other words, they trust the shop owner because that's how it is in Japan. You say that in New York City, the guy will take everything. You're lucky if you have any pants when it's over. Okay? Different cultures have different ways of doing it. That means when I work with police, I have to know where our visitors are coming from, what are the problems. If you are in Bali, you're getting Australians, that's different from Russians, that's different from Americans, that's different from Latin Americans. Brazilians do not understand lines. The idea of standing on line to a Brazilian is stupid. People who are from Latin America think, well, if you don't see me steal it, I'm not stealing it. You are stealing it, okay? But they have, to them, it's not stealing, it's just a souvenir. I took the mattress, I took the television, remote controls, pardon? Yeah, no, it's stealing, it's stealing. They're doing it, but they claim it's not, okay? That means I have to know, if I have a group coming in from Latin America, I have to I'm going to check the hotel room before they leave to see if the remote control is in the room. If it's with Americans, they probably could care less. But so you need to understand the culture of each place. If you're in Kenya, one of the things that we see, a major problem is Americans, when they get to Kenya, they do not believe they are actually in the wild. They think that when they see lions, they can get out of the car and take a picture. And you say, you can't do that. You cannot, you're in the lion's home. The lion is not in your home. Pardon? Pardon? Yeah, okay. Yes, so people, but they don't believe they're really in the wild. That's protecting the tourist against himself. So one of the things that's clear about tourism security is you have to develop the security on the general principles, but then on the needs of each place. If I'm in Bali, I need to think about beach security, known as aquatic security. If I'm in Kansas in the United States, there's no ocean. I don't have to worry about that. But on the other hand, people will not know how to deal with a tornado. If I'm in Kenya, I got to teach people, don't get out of the car when you're on a safari. Stay in the car or you're going to die. But if you're in Conroe, Texas, where it has animal park, nobody worries about it because, you know, they tame the lions. They put, you know, whatever this food stuff into their food. This is the understanding that makes tourism wonderful, but it makes it also exciting. So this was just a little bit of an introduction, but I wanted to give you some of the key elements. If you're interested, please write to me and I'll put you on my tourism newsletter. And it's free. You can have in English, Spanish, or Portuguese. I don't write Indonesian, I'm sorry. So I can't do that. But, and I hope that you learned something from this session. So thank you.